key word around trust is vulnerability. The truth of the matter is, and by the way, the word vulnerable comes from Latin wounds. Vulner is wound, and it's opening your wounds up to others. And we are meant to, if we're going to build trust with another human being, to do something that's hard, and that's to be vulnerable.
What is up? Hey everyone, Eric Brooker here. I am your host, and welcome to another episode of the Counsel Culture Podcast. By now, you know what we are all about. For those of you that are new, this is the Culture and Leadership Podcast. We are recording in Studio 9. Do me a favor, do not forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show. We always welcome your feedback, guest ideas, any input you have on this show means so much to us. Let's jump right in. Today's guest is one that I have been working on for some time. I am thrilled to have on the show today. Pat Lencioni is my guest. Pat is one of the founders of the Table Group and is the pioneer of the organizational health movement. He is the author of 13 books, which have sold over 9 million copies and have been translated in more than 30 languages. As president of the Table Group, Pat spends his time speaking and writing about leadership, teamwork, and organizational health, and consulting with executives and their teams. After more than 20 years in print, his classic book, one so many of us are familiar with, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, remains a fixture on national bestseller lists. His most recent book, The 6 Types of Working Genius, was released in September of 2022, and he is also the host of the popular business podcast, At the Table with Patrick Lencioni. This show is dedicated to Pat's journey. This conversation is what we make it. This is Counsel Culture. Pat Lencioni, it is so good to have you on the show. Welcome.
It's great to be here. I mean, the talk we had before we started, I was like, man, we should have this on because it's great.
And it's funny. It was one of those things. I agree. It was one of those things. Golly, I should have hit record like 10 minutes ago.
Sometimes work is not work at all. And more and more, I'm finding that as I kind of surrender to God's will, he's like, hey, I'm going to bring you things and it's not going to feel like work. You just obey. So this doesn't feel like work at all. It's a party.
Well, I love it. For those that have been following the show for a long time, this is a long time in the making. We start the show the same way every week. What are you most grateful for today?
For healing. I'm 60 years old, and at age 59, I came to realize that I needed to shut it down and just go deep and confront childhood stuff that I'd never done. And I sit here a year later, and God has brought me through so many things. Just this morning, I went through something and I handled it so different than I would have handled it a year ago. And I'm just grateful that God is, at this age, is still allowing me to heal.
It's interesting that you would say that. My son just brought me a glass of water as we got started, and he got a ticket. I'll out him for fun because we joke about it at home. He called at 12:45 a couple years ago. Hey guys, I got pulled over going 11 miles an hour. And we spoke to him. We spoke to the police officer. He came home and he was ready for dad's wrath. And I don't know if this is a coming of age or what it is, but he kind of peeked his head in the bedroom and was like, hey guys. And you could see he was waiting for dad to yell. And it was one of those, again, maybe it's a coming of age, maybe it's my relationship with God the Father, whatever it is. I was like, hey man, are you okay? How was that experience? And it was one of those,
Praise God.
At his age, there's natural consequences I can't fix. And so that'll be the punishment, whatever the city has. But yeah, I think the maturation as we get older is a really, really beautiful thing. So thank you for sharing that.
What a grace. Sure. And boy, not that my kids have never got a ticket or done anything. One of the things we were talking about before is this: when people share their challenges in life, it's a gift because we're meant to be vulnerable. We're all sinners. We're not perfect. And yet when we hold them back and we try to present I hate the Christmas cards that are brag things because it makes everybody feel less. This is social media. And
Yes.
when people go, oh no, I struggle too. We go, oh, thank you, brother. I can relate and I can encourage you and be encouraged and know that God has grace for us and nobody has it easy. When we project only the good, easy parts of ourselves, it's really that's really not good. I think the devil must love that. He said, just tell people your life is perfect.
Well, because
And
we all,
none
to
of
your
our
point
lives
about
are perfect.
social media, we all compare ourselves. It's this highlight reel of, well, Pat's life seems fantastic. Meanwhile, and I talk about this a lot in my keynotes, we're all going through something. We've just got to take the time to get to know each other.
Yes. Yes. Totally there. So my son, 2 years ago, before he moved here, I was at dinner and the phone rang and my 15-year-old son, who did not have his learner's permit, my wife and I were gone, we rarely left, took his car and went to see his friend and got caught and got pulled over by a cop. And I remember thinking, this is one of those moments, and he knows what he did was wrong. It was beautiful. Praise be to God. The cop got on the phone with me and I said, officer, this is serious. And I take it. And he goes, I'm going to scare him. I'm going to be very stern. I'm not going to give him the worst punishment, but I'm going to do this. And it's like, it's those moments where God is like, I have my hand on you. You're going to handle this. Okay. And anyway, so
I love it.
I can relate.
It was a question as I was preparing for this conversation that I don't normally ask people, but I've read a lot of your work. We talked about my wife, who sort of introduced me to your work a number of years ago. I'm curious, how do you describe the work that you do? How did you get into this? What's the origin story behind the Table Group?
I'll do the not the 1 minute version, but the short version. I remember when I was a kid, my dad would come home from work frustrated. And I felt bad for him. And I remember thinking, I don't know what this work thing is. And he would talk about management. And I didn't know what that was. But I thought, I don't like this. I didn't ever know I was going to do anything about this. But I remember thinking, gosh, I'm going to have a job someday. I was always kind of fascinated by work. So, I had my own jobs when I was a kid. And I thought about that and the people there, like, oh, do they like this? And then I went to college and I was the first generation to go to college in my family. And then I got a really great job, like the highest paying job I could get. It was supposed to be the best job in America at the time. And because I was a high achiever working out of my wounds of having to please everyone. And I didn't do very well because it wasn't for me. And I was like, I'm really fascinated by the workplace. And it was a job where I was supposed to be doing analysis and like quantitative stuff. And that's not me. So I said, I really want to understand the workplace and all of that. And so I got a job in another place. I talked my way into a job and just started learning about why do people love their work? Why do people manage poorly or manage well? What is leadership and teamwork about? I was just fascinated with the human side of business, and that's what I was meant to do. And so then 7 years later, I said, I'm going to start my own company to do this. And my dad, God rest his soul, was like, no, you have benefits. You're a vice president. And I was like, no, Dad, I really want to do this other stuff. And so we started the company and God blessed us, and one book and one consult client after another and one speech and one thing. And he blessed me. But 24 years into it, Eric, we refounded the company to go beyond organizational health, which is what we do, kind of coined that phrase to a certain extent. And now it's about human dignity and truth, because the world is so troubled right now. And we decided we want to speak into that as well as the organizational side. So we really rededicated our company 4 years ago to being more faith-oriented, more overt about that. And so now I spend most of my time working with organizations that are promoting faith, Jesus, and doing podcasts like yours and writing. I'm still doing organizational stuff and I love it, but it's so integrated to my faith life.
So we're going to go to the last question, which was on my list, which I wanted to talk about. So we'll come back, but you are a devout Catholic, and I am curious how your faith as a Christian has influenced your work over the years.
Well, gosh, thanks be to God, I never left my faith, but it's grown so much. I mean, we're all converts and reverts. God has no grandchildren, they say. It's like it has to become our faith. And I see that in my own kids as well. So I grew up Catholic, Christian. And so that formed me in terms of knowing that people had dignity. And being pro-life means human dignity. God created all of us in his image, and we shouldn't kill people. We should also not persecute them or treat them poorly. And so that informed it. I think that was one of the things I loved about the work I was doing. It was kind of it felt like ministry. But then as I grew deeper in my faith, I just realized even in my own wounds, I needed healing and I needed to be closer to God. And so I think that what's happened is now I realize that all of work is ministry if we see it that way. And whether I'm running a restaurant or have a job as an accountant, or have a consulting firm and work with people or minister to people, do evangelizing, everybody's work is a vocation and a ministry. We just need to kind of start every day and keep ourselves focused on the fact that Jesus is with us and he sees all that we do and we want to please him.
So I was half-heartedly joking that my wife introduced me to your work through...
I was going to compliment you on marrying a woman wiser than yourself. So
she handed me a book one day. She said, you should really read this, The 3 Big Questions for a Frantic Family. And
wow. So she found the family book.
She did. But what was so interesting is I was reading the book, and I read a lot, and she handed it to me. I started reading it. And I think it was the first book I've ever read where I thought, all right, well, while I don't know Pat, he apparently wrote this book for me, which was very generous of you. I don't know that I have a favorite. You've sold millions of copies. You've written countless books. When I was writing mine, I had someone ask me how the book writing was going. And about a little bit about the book. There was a lot of healing that took place during the writing, but there were a lot of practical things that I wrote in the book. And my wife, God love her, said, hey, I was reading chapter 8, and I know you haven't published the book yet, but it'd be really good if you put some of those ideas into practice. And she's right. One of the things that I talk about is putting the phone down. It's so hard to put the phone down, but then it becomes more difficult to be present when the phone is around. So I've got to assume the same for a lot of authors, and I've spoken to a lot of people. You've often said the ideas in your books are things you personally work on every day in business, in family, in life. What's one principle that's still hard for you to live out consistently?
Yeah, I love this question. And there's so many levels at which I'll start with a practical one. One of the things I tell CEOs and leaders is that as you get older and more successful, it's so easy to go, I really don't want to manage people anymore. I don't want to have to know what they're working on and mentor them. I want to hire people that can take care of their things so I can work on the things I want to work on. And I will say from the very beginning, I've told my clients that, and I'm not a very good day-to-day manager. I like leading more and inspiring and all that other stuff. And it's only been more recently that I've kind of leaned in and realizing that it's not natural for me to do that well, but it's my job and it's part of my ministry. So I need to do that better. So that's something that the actual day-to-day management of people is important, and it never goes away. If I'm going to run a business or an organization of any kind, I have to know what people are working on, care about them, love them, and coach them. So
we're going to talk about your working genius a little bit later, and I'm curious what the tie is between what you just shared and your working genius. Go ahead.
Though that is a tie, and you're right. And that's the good thing about it is I realize, it's kind of natural that I don't like to do that, and therefore I have to do it anyway.
It's interesting. We'll go to the working genius now because I was really fascinated. The gentleman that wrote the foreword to my book, my oldest daughter's godfather, has been someone I've known in fact, all of my adult life. And he, again, familiar with your work. A few years ago, he says, "Hey, take this test and let's talk through it." And he took his and he took mine, and he's also an author. And he said, "Eric, I bet starting to write your book was the hardest thing you've ever done. But once you got started, you ran to the finish line." And I said, "How did you know that?" And he said, "That's your working genius." He said, "But for me, it was just the opposite." And his working genius is different. So I'm going to share mine with you. My working genius is galvanizing and tenacity. My areas of competency are invention and enablement, and my areas of frustration are discernment and wonder. What does that tell you about me?
Well, it tells me that you and I are very different. And my
Okay.
thing is, starting books is so much fun for me. It's the finishing that's next to impossible. And I have to have other people that go, get back in there and don't come out until you're finished. Because I have a million ideas and I write the first 3 chapters every day. And then I have to make myself finish because I'm an ID. I'm invention and discernment are my thing. So coming up with new ideas and then evaluating them, that's what I love to do. I have no tenacity, which is the last genius, which is the finishing. You're a GT. You like to get people moving and make sure things get finished. And it is a completely different thing. So, and what's beautiful about Working Genius is that we need each other. Like you and I have completely different wiring. And together, 1 + 1 is 5.
Mm.
And yet, the thing about Working Genius, and it's all about the gifts God gives us, is that he made us to need one another. And he made us not to feel guilt and shame about who we are. Like he did not give me your gifts, Eric. You have the gift of rallying people and driving for closure and getting things done. I have the gift for coming up with ideas out of nothing and gut feel about what's the idea might work the best. Alone, you're not going to be able to do anything. But together we can actually do things. So you have people you work with, your wife, your kids, your coworkers, and I do too. And he built us to need one another to fill in one another's gaps. And that's such a beautiful thing. And yet we go through life wishing we had the things we don't, taking for granted the gifts he gave us, and even feeling guilty that we're not as good as other people at the things they're good at. And that's tragedy. And that's the devil. He wants us to not be grateful for what we have and to want the things we don't. And God's like, no, I gave you enough. And I love you just the way you are. So now I've learned to celebrate what I stink at. And I've learned to love my wife just as much for the things she doesn't do well. It's like, I just want to hug the parts of her that forget things. I used to get frustrated with her and it was in her Working Genius. And now that I know what her Working Genius is, I'm like, oh, that's what makes her who she is. That's what I love about her. So God made us to embrace our strengths and our weaknesses and to try to get a little better in our weaknesses, but to realize that we're not meant to be perfect. Only Jesus was the perfect man.
It's interesting you put it in the realm of working genius. I've never thought of having my wife do it. And Jen, I love you to pieces, but it's taken me 20 years of marriage to recognize if she buys it on Amazon, it's never, ever, ever going to get returned. And I've finally come to the point in time where I realize if I want something from Amazon to make it back to Amazon, I've got to do that. I've grown to have an affection for that, but I'd love to do it on the backside of understanding her working genius.
Okay, I'm going to tell you a story. And my wife used to hate that I tell this story. I think she likes it now because I love my wife. And we've been married for 33 years. And I can honestly say, and by the way, I'm going to tell everybody out there who's married, every day isn't always easy. And you go through periods in your life. And thank God for all of that. But I love her more today than I've ever loved her. I mean, like I really do. Praise God for that. What a great thing. Well, I'm going to tell you probably 10 or 15 years ago, I came home from work one day. So my wife's working genius is W and I. They're the first two. They're head in the clouds. They're up there like wonder, which is just constantly pondering the depth of things, and invention, coming up with new ideas. She lives in that world. Well, the next 4 get closer and closer to implementation, to actually getting things done. My wife's gifts are not about getting things done. They're about thinking and wondering and pondering. And I love that about her. But one day I came home from work and the lights didn't go on in the house when I walked in. And I said, hey, Laura, I think the power in our neighborhood's out, because we used to live in California. They turned out the power all the time. And she goes, nope, the neighborhood's got power. And I looked outside and there, yeah, I could see the street lights were on. I said, oh, you're right. I said, well, should I check the fuse box? Because I think we might have blown a fuse. She goes, no, the fuse box is fine. And I said, well, what's going on? She goes, they cut our power off. The power company cut our power off. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, yeah, we forgot to pay the bill. And we means she, because she paid the bills. She took it for the team because I hate it too. And I said, don't they usually send us a notice before they cut the power off? She goes, oh yeah, they send like 3 notices and they're around here somewhere. And I got really frustrated then. I was like, how can she do this? This is important for our family. And now I realize she was doing stuff that's hard for her. She didn't do it on purpose. And now when something happens in our house that we forget, I just like want to hug her and go, you were this way as a girl. I am this way too. Neither of us like to finish things. So imagine, Eric, there's never going to be a time when your power gets cut off because you are a GT. You would never. You must go like, how in the world could that happen? For us, it will probably happen again. And we will light candles and laugh our butts off because that's how God made us. Now, that doesn't mean we do it on purpose. It doesn't mean we don't try to be better at the things we're not good at, but we're never going to be super, super organized. And my wife buys a lot of things that we're going to have to send that back. And then 5 years later, we still have it in the closet. And that's how he made us.
Well, and it's beautiful because the things we end up not returning, we end up regifting, and they just go into a regifting pile. And so, Pat, you may get that in the mail in the not too distant future.
I love it. Yeah, we should have a business where everybody just puts out there, here's all the things we didn't return. Anybody want it?
Oh, that's so funny. There's really 2 things about your work that I'm most fascinated by, and I've been fascinated with these 2 ideas over the years. I had a woman named Leanne Davey on my show. Leanne Davey wrote a book called
I know that name.
The Good Fight, and she talks about the importance of conflict. And I often joke, and I have a long pregnant pause on purpose. I say I love conflict. But I don't love conflict for conflict's sake. I love conflict for the purposes of resolution. And we've lived here in Minneapolis for about 13 years, and I joke that Minnesotans are conflict averse. You've said meaningful conflict is critical. In your experience, why even great leaders, why is it that even great leaders try and avoid healthy conflict? And how can we, either husbands and wives or leaders, co-workers, how can we learn to argue well?
Well, so first of all, I think we need, and I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday. Conflict is not personal, like interpersonal, mean-spirited conflict. It's got to be based on trust. Getting into a conflict with somebody you don't trust is unwise. So the first thing in a relationship, you need to trust each other. And that means vulnerability. That means I know that I trust that person and they can trust me, that we will admit when we're wrong. We will acknowledge when the other person has a better idea. We will even apologize if we do something that's unfair. When you know you have that kind of trust, conflict becomes nothing but the pursuit of truth or the best possible answer. So you want the truth. So you're like, how should we raise our child? Well, if you're not arguing about that, then you might not think it's important and you don't care. Now, is it that I want to win the argument or that I want to really solve it? If my wife says, this is the way we should do this, and I realize she's right, I will go, oh my gosh, you are totally right. And so conflict is about how to find the right answer, but I have to trust her. Now, if I didn't trust a person, didn't think they could admit they were wrong, or didn't think they had the mutual best interest in mind, arguing with them is just literally trying to manipulate them to give in. So conflict needs to be with trust. But when you do have trust, there's still people that don't like conflict. And I think it goes back to everything from their personality. You know, they might be introverted, so they like to think inside, and extroverts can process out here, and introverts are like, I need to go think about it. I used to say to my wife all the time, what do you think? And she goes, I don't know, I have to think about it. And I would go, why do you have to think about it? I know what I think. It's like, yeah, I'm an extrovert.
That's me.
She's an introvert. So, or she's a feeler and I might be a thinker. And it's like, thinkers don't take it personally. They're like, we're just debating. And she might be like, no, when somebody disagrees with me, it really hurts my heart. Or it might be she never saw her parents argue. And so we have to consider all of those things. I've learned another one in the last year. Some people have what's called anxious attachment disorder, which means if you don't resolve something, they can't sit still. So they enter into conflict to get peace in their peace of mind. And other people have what's called avoidant attachment disorder, which means if there's a disagreement, they go to retreat. Well, so if I don't understand all of those different things, I might not know why a person doesn't do that. But I will say this to answer your question. What leaders need to do is, or anybody needs to focus on building trust and then practice some good old-fashioned exposure therapy. And just say, let's try this. Let's just agree that we can let's go and have the conversation. And if it gets a little uncomfortable, just say, hey, it's getting uncomfortable, but I'm going to keep doing it. And you get through it a few times and you realize, oh, not only was that okay and we survived it, but we got to the best answer. And I feel closer to you as a result of that. Even a conflict averse person is going to get better at it. But if you had trauma in your life based on conflict, or you have really serious avoidant attachment disorder, there's going to be a limit as to how far you can go in that. So my old answer would have been similar, and that's understand the importance of it. Understand that if you trust each other, it means you're pursuing the right answer. And then do some good, exposure therapy. But go a little deeper too and ask yourself why it might be hard for you.
So it's interesting. I told you there were two things that I was fascinated with. One was the conflict piece. The other happens to be trust. So I want to jump into this, but then I want to come back to conflict at home, which I really want your opinion on. But before we get there, the foundation of your 5 dysfunctions pyramid is the absence of trust.
Yes.
What are a few signs leaders can look for that trust is missing? And if it is, how can we rebuild it without forcing it?
Well, that's an interesting question. Forcing it isn't maybe not the right, but we have to lean into it and do it even when we don't want to. And the key word around trust is vulnerability. The key word around trust is vulnerability. And the truth of the matter is, and by the way, the word vulnerable comes from Latin wounds. Vulner is wound. And it's opening your wounds up to others. And, they talk about Jesus made himself vulnerable on the cross. Think about that. God made man, made himself vulnerable to us on the cross. And we are meant to, if we're going to build trust with another human being, to do something that's hard, and that's to be vulnerable. And vulnerability means, can I acknowledge when I make a mistake? Can I say, I love when an athlete says, my bad. That's like, wow. Can I say, something, you're better than I am at something, and I'd like to learn from you? Can I say, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, I was rude to you? Can I say, I don't know the answer and I need help? When we ask people, we have an assessment that teams take. When they struggle to say those things, we know that there's a trust issue. But when people work together on a team, and this is what Working Genius is great for too, is when they go, hey, you guys, look at my report. I suck at this. That's like, isn't that great when people can say, I'm terrible at that? Or, yeah, that was probably my fault because I didn't go hard enough at that, and I'm really sorry. So what we do is we say, instead of just talk about trust, we talk about how comfortable are you being vulnerable with others? And nobody comes out of the womb wanting to be vulnerable. Original sin is that we want to protect ourselves. But so what we do is we just teach people, like, get used to saying things like, I'm wrong, or I'm sorry, or I need help, or you're better than I am at this. And it's a relief. Everybody wants to be that person. Everybody wants to get to that point. It's such a relief in your marriage when you can just go, that was my fault and I'm sorry. So we really focus on vulnerability to get to trust.
It is really interesting. My wife taught me, back to you, Jen. My wife taught me when we first got married. I was maybe not this stern. She wasn't this stern. But I don't say I'm sorry. And she had this really profound teaching in her journey that I'm sorry it's cold outside. I'm sorry it's raining. I'm sorry that the neighbor decided to tear down, this is happening as we speak. I'm sorry the neighbor decided to tear down 30 trees with chainsaws while you're on with Pat Lencioni. We ask right now.
I didn't hear it. Did you hear the leaf blower outside mine?
No. Oh, that's great.
See?
I love it. But to ask for forgiveness for the things that we have done wrong. So when my wife says, hey, I thought you were going to go to the grocery store, and it's full sentence, it's not please forgive me, it's not I'm sorry, It's Jen, please forgive me for not going to the store. I can do that now if you'd like. And it's beautiful to watch your kids ask for forgiveness of each other. It's beautiful to have your kids ask for forgiveness from you. One of the hardest things as a parent to do is to ask your kids for forgiveness for the areas in which you have failed them.
So many people of my generation, I'm older than you, have told me, I don't know that, and I felt this way, I don't think I ever heard my parents say they were sorry. Because there was a generation there where I think it was like, I'm your parent, I shouldn't have to do that. And there's such a profound example when a parent can say, you know something, I'm sorry I handled that poorly. It gives you a sense of that you're valuable. And it teaches
Yes.
you that you can apologize too. And the whole generation, a lot of people, parents said, I should never have to apologize to my kids. And it just taught them the wrong thing. And it made them feel like, I guess I was wrong all the time, you know? And so when we can, and anybody listening to this, it's like, gee, I guess I don't apologize to my kids or my spouse enough. Go tomorrow and say, hey, I'm sorry. You know something? I don't apologize very much. And I know I've done things I should apologize for. You could just apologize for that.
Yeah.
It is one of the most powerful, liberating things for you and for them.
So I want to ask you about conflict at home. Great advice for us 20 some odd years ago when we were engaged was your kids should see you argue. Now, let me be very clear. There is value in taking certain conversations into a different room. But in large part, my kids see us bicker. Honey, I thought you were going to get milk. Well, I didn't get milk. My conversation went long. Just those little things. And the logic was you don't want your kids growing up thinking the wrong thing of what marriage is. To your point earlier, marriage is hard. There's conflict, there's resolution. What's your take on that either in the business setting or at home?
So one of the things I would say, well, the first thing is St. Thomas Aquinas says that the answer is in the middle. You know, should you never fight in front of your kids or should you fight like cats and dogs? And the answer is no, they should see that you have disagreement and you can do that. I would say, and then they should see you make up. Because what a great
Yes.
thing. Like my wife and I, we erred on the side of more conflict than we should have. But my kids always did see, we could be in the car and we could be really mad at each other on going on vacation. And I'd be like, hey, I'm sorry, you guys, what I said to mom, that was not right. And we love each other. And so they could go like, oh, you can survive that and be okay. So, but if I could do it again, would I do it less? Oh, yeah. Now, my wife would have said when she was a kid, she never saw her parents argue. So she was shocked when we argued. And she would say, yeah, she should have leaned into it a little bit more. It was more, but you know, that's what healing and learning is all about.
I want to shift gears a little bit to culture. Culture is without doubt a buzzword in business today, but you
Yeah.
call culture essential. When you're hiring or advising clients, what's non-negotiable? What do you look for that reveals how someone will be when they're hired, whether they will elevate the culture or erode the culture?
Well, the first thing is that the leadership team they have to know what the culture is. Okay. So many people go, we want to hire people, make a good culture. And it's like, but what's your culture? Like, oh, I don't know. And it's like, yeah, the answer can't be, I don't know. It's like, we have to have like a few very clear behavioral values. Our culture and the table group, we have 4. It's you can't be ego driven. It's humble. It's you can't be lazy. You need to be hungry. You have to have a work ethic. You can't be like, I don't want to do this. You have to be emotionally aware of people, and we all make mistakes. And then you have to have some courage. You have to realize we're going to have to. And when we refounded our company years ago, we said, we have to have courage about what's going on in the world. We're not going to. And if you're the kind of person who's like afraid to acknowledge like that's not good and you want to please everybody around that, it's not going to be good for you. So that's our culture. So now when it goes to hiring people, what we have to do is we have to interview them in ways that really help us understand if they do that. And that's not a generic interview where you get their resume and you sit there, oh, you did this, you do this. We try to get them out of the office, get to know them at a different level, and be completely frank with them about what our culture is. Do that in the spirit of listen, we're not trying to decide if you're going to want to work here and we're going to want to work with you. And you might be a wonderful person who doesn't belong here. So this is not about rejection. It's like, let me tell you what we're all about. And then let's talk about whether you're going to thrive here. What we tend to do is we try to make interviewing kind of like dating in the wrong way. Like, I'm trying to convince you that I'm worth it and you're trying to convince me. What we ought to do is go, listen, I'm this, you're this. Is this going to work or not? And so don't ever hire somebody that is going to be unhappy and that you're going to have to let go a year later, because that's not good for anybody. So we're like, we call it scare people with sincerity. Say, this is our culture. If you like these things, you're going to love it here. If not, you probably won't. And the right people will leave and the other people will be drawn to you.
I talk to a lot of leaders that think their culture is great, and then when I come in and analyze the business, it's not what they think it is. So my question is really around, I know what the culture of a business is because it's written with vinyl letters on the walls at the corporate office. But in practice, I've gotten hired and that's not the culture. How does one identify the real culture in the business?
And the number one thing is watch how the executives behave. Watch how the leaders behave. Too many times leaders will come. I once worked with an organization that wanted to come up with their core values. And they were like, friendly. We like friendly people. And I was like, you guys don't seem very friendly to me. And they were like, we're not friendly at all. And I said, so don't make that your value, because they were like kind of rude and driven. And I was like, why would you say that's and they were, because I think they felt guilty about it. And it's like, no. Actually, just describe the culture as like, hey, we're not overly soft here. We're not that amicable. And if you need that, this probably wouldn't be the place to work. So lean into what is true about how you really are. I worked years ago at Oracle Corporation, which before anybody knew what Oracle was, it's this big company. And the culture was infighting, politics, win at all cost, make your numbers, and beat the competition. It was brutal, but it was real. And they actually tried to hire people that fit the culture. And so even though, and I unfortunately got prepped for my interview and talked my way into the job thinking, yeah, and then I had to work there. But you got to know what's really true about you. And you've got to hire people that fit that. Now, that's not a culture I liked or wanted to be a part of. I left quickly thereafter. But be honest with people about how you behave and what you value. And you'll get people that want to be there, and you'll repel people that shouldn't be there. I like to say that a good culture should be really intolerant of people who don't fit. In a world where everybody's like, you have to tolerate everything. It's like, no. If I have a company in customer service, we are fanatical about customer service. Be brutally intolerant of people that are indifferent about that. And when you walk in that room with the executive team or walk in the hallways, you should notice how people act and treat one another. And you should notice that they sometimes go even too far. And that's when you know it's the culture is real.
So I want to jump back to family life. You've
By
talked
the way,
about
there's leaves falling off my roof. There's guys on the roof blowing leaves off the roof right now. And you might not be able to hear it, but it's like.
But that's real life. I love it.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
it. There's still, we moved into this house 6 months ago, and
wow,
the neighbor had what appeared to be a forest in their backyard. And for whatever reason, today they decided to take all of the trees down. But let's talk about chaos families. You've talked about chaos families. You've compared them to dysfunctional teams. I'm curious, what lessons from 5 dysfunctions do you apply most directly to family life?
Well, all the same things apply, but it's more important because the family is a more important organization than our company, which is why I wrote the family book, because I thought, why don't I do any of the stuff at home that I do at work? And so the family book is about, let's get clear about what our core values are. And it's not just nice things, it's what's true about us. Let's get clear about what our strategy is, and let's get clear about what we actually value the most, so that when somebody asks you a question, because chaos comes from trying to be all things to all people. So people say, do you want to buy a house at the lake with us? And you're like, I don't know. Does that fit our strategy and our values? Do you want to sign your son up for underwater travel lacrosse? You're like, I don't know. Does that fit our strategy? Do you guys want to add on to, every decision we have to make when we have no true north or no guidelines or guardrails, every decision is potential chaos, And Laura will say, hey, do you want to go on vacation with the Jones family? And I'm like, I don't know. Do I feel guilty? Should I say yes? Should I say no? How are they going to feel? It's like we have to look at, does that fit our strategy? Does that fit our values? Does that fit our goals? No, it doesn't. No, we can say no and feel really good about it. It's the inability to say no to things and feel confident in that drives chaos. And what happens is comparison becomes the thief of joy, and we try to measure up to every family around us. And even families that go to church and sit in the pew next to us have different strategies and values. So if we sit and look at the Christmas card or the people sitting around us or our neighbors and try to measure up to all of them, it's chaos. We have to know, no, this is who we are. We're going to stick to that and be happy about that. And it's going to make for a lot less being overwhelmed.
I don't want this to be a leading question, and I feel like it sort of feels like it is. I interviewed, I don't know if you know the name Andy Andrews. I interviewed and I've gotten to know Andy over the last couple years.
Remind me who Andy Andrews is.
Andy wrote The Noticer, The Visitor, very well-respected Christian author. He's written about 30. And he, like you, has sold millions of copies of his book. And I asked him, what's the book you're most proud of? And he chose this obscure book that I have read because he was kind enough to send me a copy. In fact, I'm going to send you a copy, come to think of it. But the book's called The Heart Mender. And he said, I've probably sold less copies of The Heart Mender than any other book, but it's the one that has impacted me the most. So I'm curious, I'll ask you the same question. What's the book that you've written that's had the biggest impact on you personally?
Ooh, that's so proud of, or had the biggest impact on me personally. And it is hard to pick. So I wrote a book called The Better Pastor, which I wrote just for a bunch of Catholic priests because I had this organization, me and another guy started, called The Amazing Parish. And so I wrote a book just for Catholic priests, and I read it recently again, and I really liked it. And I thought, oh God, you really inspired me. So I loved that. The Working Genius book, because of the model, is really important. But I think I wrote this book called The Motive, which was my second to last business book. And it's about why leaders become leaders in the first place. And it really goes deep in like, are you doing this for yourself, for your ego, for your power and everything? Or are you doing it for others because you want to suffer more than the people that you lead? And I think that it impacted me the most because I know that I struggled with it. And more readers came to me and said, I realized I had the wrong motive and I wanted to change. So it was people not saying, hey, that was great, it affirmed me as a great leader. It's people that said, that really kicked me in the butt. And it made me realize I needed to change my motivation for what I did. So I think the motive might be, but gosh, it's really hard. My dad's favorite book, God Rest His Soul, was my second one. I really liked that. But I'll go with the motive.
So
and
actually,
The Better Pastor.
A nice lead in, because it's one of our last questions. I want to talk to you about the motive. I was reading that book and realized why I got into leadership. I got into leadership because I was really good at what I did and the company didn't want to lose me. So we'll just give you a bigger title and a little bit more money. I was absolutely leading for all the wrong reasons. How can you tell if you've slipped into leading for the reward rather than the responsibility? And when you realize you're leading for the wrong reasons, what's the first step back?
The first thing is you have to admit it, and you have to say to people, you know something, you guys, I'm doing this for the wrong reason. Let me tell you how I lost mine. It was fun. And I think this is I came to work and said, I built the company pretty well. We're doing okay. I'm at this place in my life. I just want to go to work and work on whatever I feel like. And I'm entitled to that, right? And the answer is no. It's a responsibility. And I realized that I was abdicating things that weren't interesting to me, even though they mattered. And so I had to say, okay, this is how I've lost my way. And I had to admit that to people so that they can then hold me accountable and help me realize I don't want to be that way. So that's the first thing you need to do. And that's what happened to me. And we all do slide. I mean, it's like anything else. We have to develop the habit. And how do we know? There's 5 different activities that I found that leaders don't like to do. And maybe there's 2 of them they don't like to do that are kind of the ones that people abdicate. And I've had people write to me and say, I was 0 for 5. I was abdicating all 5 of the most important responsibilities of a leader. And like one of them is managing your people. Sounds really simple, but are you actually doing that? One of them is taking responsibility for the way our team works together and having here's one, having really uncomfortable conversations with people. So many leaders abdicate that. They just don't do it. Another one is repeating themselves all the time. A leader has to be like a parent, has to go around and say, hey, remember what our strategy is. Remember what our values are. Hey, remember why we do this. Remember what our goals are. Their job is to, and they're like, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm bored with that. And it's like, I don't care. And the other one is you have to run great meetings. And so many leaders like, I just hate meetings. Why do I even have to have them? I don't even want to have them. I'll just make them short. It's like, no, if you've given up on having good meetings, then you're not actually leaning into your job. So there's those 5 things, and people go through that and go, yeah, I'm 2 for 5 or 3 for 5. And so they go back to their team and go, I need to do these 2 things better. I just don't like it.
I gave a talk about 6 months ago, and a lot of this came up in my talk. And I had someone reach out to me shortly after and said, hey, it's Friday morning. I run all of my team meetings on Fridays, and we traveled all week. I have nothing for them today. Do I still have to run a meeting, or can I cancel it? And you and I talked about vulnerability. You and I talked about relationship capital. We use different words, but I said, you absolutely have to run a meeting. And he goes, well, what am I going to talk about? I said, why don't you get to know the people that work for you? Why don't you shut the laptop, put the phone down, be present? What are you doing this weekend? Tell me a little bit more about your family. You mentioned a couple months ago that you moved into a new house. Tell me about that. How's the transition? Are the kids in? Just getting to know people for who they are and not what they do.
You know, there's a book I wrote that I always forget about. I spoke yesterday in Austin, Texas at this conference for leaders, and they were asking me about all my books, but I never talked about this one called the 3, it was originally titled The 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. And I am very proud of this because this was the book I wrote that went back to my dad not liking his job. And the 3 signs of a miserable job are when people feel anonymous, when they feel like their work doesn't matter, and they don't know if they're doing a good job. And our job as a leader is to know the people who work for us. And so I love what you just said. It's like, if you have nothing else at the meeting, spend the time investing in knowing them. Do you know, and everybody I talk to, I'm like, hey, remember when you started working or when you were a middle manager? Did you care if your leader, you actually knew what was going on in your life? You're like, oh yeah, it was huge for me. Like, how well do you know the people? Like, not well at all. So go to them and be vulnerable. We're bringing it all together here, Eric. Go to them and be vulnerable and say, I can't believe I haven't shown enough interest in your lives. I want to care about you, and I haven't really talked to you about what's going on. So we're going to take this meeting, and I just want to know what matters to you in your life right now. And I'll share with you what matters to me. And I want to change the culture around here because we are people first. And if we don't know and care about each other, professionally and personally, we're not going to be a good team. I love that. There's never a lack of something you can do to make the team better.
Last question. I feel like we could do this for days. I've got a million questions. I kind of just want to fly out to Nashville and have coffee with you, but
me too.
You have done a ton of these over the years, podcasts galore, media interviews. I'm curious, what's one question that you wish people would ask you, but they don't?
You know, maybe like, what is the most important? I hate discipline. I grew up over disciplined and fearful and trying to please everybody, but discipline is so important. It's learning. And it's like, what are the most important, simple disciplines that you need in your life that changes you?
How would you reply to that?
One of the things that's totally changed my life is that when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is I lay there and talk to Jesus. And my mind wanders, and I keep going back, and I spend 20 minutes if I can doing that. And then I listen to the readings from Mass that day on my phone. And so I start with that kind of prayer. And then the other discipline is at night, my wife and I, and we've just started doing this more regularly, is we pray together. And without those bookend disciplines, everything in the middle is chaos. And frankly, I should stop at noon and at 5 and do that again, but at least starting my day slowly with God and then ending my day with God, that is the best leadership advice I could ever give someone.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end the show. Where can people find you? Where can people find your work?
We have a website called tablegroup.com. That's the name of my company, tablegroup.com. And then there's workinggenius.com, which is a separate site where you can do the Working Genius. And everything is in there. There's free stuff in there. There's ways to get the assessment and to learn, and videos and all that kind of stuff. So that's the best place.
I'm going to ask a bonus question.
Oh yeah,
Go ahead.
we have a podcast. We have a Working Genius podcast that people listen to because they just love to get into it. And I have one called At the Table, which is just about the work.
All right. So I know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyway. Why the Table Group? Where did the name come from?
Great question. I wanted it to be, I believe that the table is the best piece of technology in the world. There's still nothing like sitting around a table and eat with Zoom and computers and everything else. And I started the company 28 years ago. Even then, I thought this still is the best thing, sitting down around a table. And that's what we do. We get together with our clients and we have them do that. And it's simple, it's sturdy. And then I thought about the table, the Last Supper and the table. And I thought, this is a pretty important thing.
I love it. Pat Lencioni, thank you so much for coming on the show.
This has been completely my pleasure, Eric. I really enjoy it. What a great podcast you have.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Counsel Culture today. If you liked the show, please consider sharing it with a friend. Please also take a moment to rate and review. You can always find us on social media, or feel free to email me directly at eb@ericbrooker.com. Leadership is a choice, and culture is contagious. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Counsel Culture.